I'm Julian Caldwell, the black sheep of the most powerful political dynasty in America. I have three great passions in life: zoning out, watching talking heads yell at each other on cable news, and cashing my trust fund check on the first of the month. My life, which had been a comfortable exercise in meaninglessness, got a little more interesting the day I married Elena Rostova. All of Washington, D.C. whispered that I'd married a monster, an ice queen, ruthless, ambitious, with no respect for the old guard. They said it was only a matter of time before I divorced her. I was starting to believe them. Until that day, my so-called childhood sweetheart, Tiffany, in front of my grandmother Matilda, the formidable matriarch of the Caldwell clan, dropped a vintage Patek Philippe watch. It shattered on the marble floor. Through a flood of tears, she implied Elena had pushed her. Matilda, her eyes like chips of ice, told me to show some backbone and get my wife in line. I was trying to figure out how to smooth things over when Elena, who hadn't even glanced at Tiffany, calmly pulled a tablet from her clutch and handed it to a senior White House aide. On the screen was a PDF, a proposal for the emergency audit and risk assessment of the National Treasure's archive. She said that one broken watch was a small matter, but the potential loss of national assets was a threat to the country's heritage. She recommended an immediate lockdown of all secure archival facilities, pending a full audit by a joint task force from the Department of Justice, the Treasury, and the FBI. She suspected an inside job, a conspiracy to steal and sell off national treasures. In that moment, watching the blood drain from my grandmother's face and the utter confusion on my brother Robert's, the President of the United States, I suddenly felt the D.C. gossip mill might have been a little conservative. My wife wasn't just a monster. She was a goddamn apex predator. My wife's wedding gift was a kill list. My name is Julian Caldwell. My unofficial title is the Spare. As the name implies, my older brother, the President, just wants me to stay out of trouble. I get it. My daily routine consists of showing up to the occasional charity gala, sipping whatever they're serving, and then going home to my sprawling, empty Georgetown townhouse. Life, for me, is about spectating. My wife is Elena Rostova, the only daughter of the legendary statesman Dmitri Rostova. Marrying her wasn't my idea, it was Robert's. He said Dmitri Rostova was a national hero, his daughter was a genius, and she was the perfect match for me. The perfect match for me. On our wedding day, I lifted her veil. Elena was beautiful, with sharp, intelligent eyes and posture, so perfect she could have been carved from marble. She didn't smile. She looked lethal. On our wedding night, she gave me a welcome gift. It was a dossier. It listed every single member of my 37-person household staff, from my chief of staff down to the gardeners. It detailed who was on Matilda's payroll, who was leaking information to my brother's office, and who were plants from other political rivals. The dossier included detailed financial workups on each one, along with metadata tracking the times and frequencies of their intel drops. It was more thorough than an FBI background check. I was stunned. "What is this?" I asked. She pushed the file across the table, her voice flat. "For your review, Julian, I recommend these individuals be terminated." "How?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "The family has a property in rural Alaska," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "Very remote. Terrible cell service. People disappear up there all the time." She said this while methodically polishing a pair of diamond earrings. I stared at her. She stared at the diamonds. The air in the room dropped 20 degrees. "How about we just fire them?" I suggested. "Give them a generous severance package to ensure their silence." "Acceptable," she nodded. "As you wish." And with that, she went to bed. I watched her sleep, her face a mask of tranquility. I didn't close my eyes all night. I had a sinking feeling I hadn't married a D.C. socialite. I'd married a fixer for the CIA, the kind they send to orchestrate coups. The next day, my entire staff was replaced. Elena brought in a new team, handpicked from her father's old network. Within hours, the townhouse was running with silent, ruthless efficiency. My former chief of staff, a distant nephew of one of Matilda's oldest cronies, was found to have embezzled over $300,000 from my accounts. Elena didn't yell or threaten. She simply forwarded the evidence to the IRS and the U.S. Attorney's Office, along with a highlighted copy of the federal code on wire fraud and tax evasion. He was indicted by the end of the week. They say he's looking at 10 years at a minimum security federal prison. The way the news staff looked at Elena changed. The way I looked at her changed, too. I started to realize there was something more to my wife. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw tantrums. She just quietly presented the rules, and then let the rules crush those who broke them. The feeling was novel, and a hell of a lot more interesting than watching C-SPAN. The quiet life didn't last long. Trouble arrived, and its name was Tiffany Vance, daughter of Secretary of the Interior Vance, and my supposed childhood friend. We made mud pies together once at some godforsaken summer retreat. I'd forgotten all about it, but she seemed to remember it with vivid, painful clarity. That day, Matilda had summoned us to the White House for a family brunch. I walked beside Elena. She was, as always, immaculate, her gaze fixed forward, her steps measured and precise, as if calculated by a machine. When we entered the solarium, Matilda was holding a young woman's hand. The woman had red-rimmed eyes, and when she saw me, she shot up like a startled deer. Julian, hi. Great. Tiffany Vance. I gave a curt nod. Elena inclined her head slightly, a gesture that was perfectly polite and utterly dismissive. Matilda looked at Elena like she was a plate of unseasoned, boiled chicken. Elena, you're here. Sit. Thank you, Matilda, Elena said, her back ramrod straight as she sat. The next 30 minutes were a masterclass in passive aggression, starring Matilda and Tiffany. Tiffany is such a thoughtful girl, Matilda began. She knew I've been having trouble sleeping, so she brought me this special blend of chamomile tea from a little shop in London. Tiffany blushed. It's an honor to do anything for you, Mrs. Caldwell. Oh, I do wish I had more people around here who were so considerate, Matilda sighed, shooting a pointed look at Elena. Elena was busy examining the pattern on her teacup. She didn't take the bait. I sat there, fighting off a wave of drowsiness. I've been watching these power plays my whole life. The script was always the same. Criticize the daughter-in-law by praising someone else. Usually, the daughter-in-law either bites her tongue or gets defensive. Both are losing moves. Tiffany, seeing Elena's silence, could barely contain her smirk. She stood up, holding a bowl of soup. Mrs. Caldwell, you should have your soup while it's hot. I had the chef prepare it just the way you like. She walked toward Matilda. As she passed Elena, her foot seemed to catch on nothing. Oh, she yelped. She stumbled, and the bowl of soup went flying, aimed straight at Elena. My eyes snapped open. Here we go. The oldest trick in the book. Elena moved with lightning speed, twisting sideways so most of the soup splattered on the floor. But Tiffany was faster. She collapsed to the ground, and as she did, the vintage Patek Philippe on her wrist hit the marble floor with a sickening crack. And then came the waterworks. Oscar-worthy tears. Oh, Elena, I'm so sorry. Your dress. She sobbed, but her eyes were glued to the shattered watch on the floor. The subtext was clear. I'll apologize for your dress, but you just destroyed a priceless family heirloom my mother left me. Brilliant. 2 birds, 1 stone. She'd made a scene, humiliated Elena, and played the victim, all in one move. The performance was good enough for Broadway. Matilda's face hardened. What is the meaning of this? Have you no decorum? Her words were aimed squarely at Elena. She helped Tiffany up, tuteing over the broken watch. Tiffany, dear, you shouldn't have. Elena is young. She doesn't know any better. You have to be the one to make allowances for her. And there it was. The verdict, delivered without a trial. My wife was the reckless one who had pushed her and destroyed her precious memento. I looked at Elena. She was dabbing at a few drops of soup on her skirt with a napkin. Her face was a blank canvas. It was as if the shattered object on the floor wasn't a $100,000 watch, but a piece of cheap plastic. My wife doesn't understand political games. She understands the law. The air in the solarium was thick enough to cut with a knife. The White House staff stood frozen, staring at the floor. Tiffany was still sniffling. It's not Elena's fault. It was all me. I'm so clumsy. Matilda patted her hand, her expression screaming, You're too good for this world, you precious angel. Then, she turned her fire on me. Robert, she snapped at my brother, the president. Do you see this? This is the woman you brought into our family. Arrogant, disrespectful. She can't even tolerate a sweet girl like Tiffany. Oh, right. I forgot to mention my brother was there. He dropped in for brunch and walked right into this soap opera. Now, he looked like he wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Robert looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. Control your wife. Get her to apologize. Make this go away. I cleared my throat, ready to deploy my one and only skill, pouring oil on troubled waters. Grandmother, I'm sure this is all just, Before I could finish, Elena stood up. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She didn't even look at Tiffany. She walked to the center of the room and addressed my brother and grandmother with formal deference. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. Mr. President, Mrs. Caldwell, I believe there may be something unusual about this situation. Matilda sneered. Unusual? I saw it with my own eyes. Are you calling me a liar? Of course not, Elena said. I would never question you. However, the watch Miss Vance has just broken appears to be quite remarkable. She turned to Tiffany, who flinched under her gaze. Miss Vance, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that the Patek Philippe that belonged to President Eisenhower? The one he wore on D-Day? Tiffany's face went pale. How did you know? Elena didn't answer her. She took out her tablet. Swiped. Before my wedding, I reviewed the official manifest of the National Treasures Archive. It lists the Eisenhower Patek as being secured in a climate-controlled vault at the Smithsonian. It's an irreplaceable artifact of American history, valued in the tens of millions. It has never been authorized for removal. She paused, her gaze drifting to Tiffany's pale wrist. You claim this was a gift from your late mother, but your mother, respected as she was the wife of a cabinet secretary. How would she have come to possess an item of such immense national significance? The room fell silent. I could see Tiffany's lips trembling. Matilda's expression shifted from anger to alarm. My brother Robert frowned. I got it. Elena was a genius. She wasn't arguing about who pushed whom. She was changing the entire battlefield. Forget the petty drama. Let's talk about the felony. You, the daughter of a cabinet member, are in possession of a priceless national treasure that should be in a secure government vault. The question is no longer about a spilled bowl of soup. The question is about grand larceny. Espionage even. Tiffany was panicking. I didn't know. My mother gave it to me. Oh. Elena closed the file on her tablet. Then it seems the problem originated with your mother. She turned back to my brother. Mr. President, I urge you to launch a full investigation. The disappearance of a national treasure from a secure facility is a matter of national security. It suggests a catastrophic failure in our protocols, likely involving high-level corruption. If we don't get to the bottom of it, the very integrity of our nation's heritage is at stake. I sucked in a breath. Holy hell, she just escalated a brunch spat into a federal crisis. I looked at Elena's slender back, and for a moment, I didn't recognize her. This wasn't a political wife. This was a goddamn special prosecutor. The kind who doesn't stop until entire careers are in flames and people are doing perp walks on the evening news. My wife, it turned out, didn't play political games. She weaponized federal law. She wants to audit the government. My grandmother's face is turning green. Robert's expression was a sight to behold. He glanced from Tiffany to Elena, then shot me a look that screamed, help me. What could I do? I just spread my hands. My wife had just dropped a political atom bomb on the proceedings. Investigate, or don't investigate. If he didn't, it would look like a cover-up. The story would leak, and the headline would be that the Caldwell administration couldn't even keep track of its own national treasures. His credibility would be shot. If he did, it would trigger a massive, messy investigation involving multiple federal agencies. The media would have a field day. Matilda's face had gone from pale to a sickly shade of green. She'd intended to put Elena in her place. Instead, Elena had put her beloved Tiffany on a spit and was roasting her over an open flame. And it was a slow roast. Matilda couldn't figure out how to pull her off without getting burned herself. She couldn't very well say, Robert, stop the investigation. I'm the one who pulled strings to sneak the watch out of the museum to give to Tiffany. That would be the end of her reign as the dynasty's matriarch. Enough. Matilda slammed her hand on the table. This is a private family matter. Stop this nonsense at once. She was trying to use her authority to shut it down. Elena didn't flinch. She remained a picture of calm professionalism. I apologize if I have caused you distress, Matilda, but as you said, this is a matter of decorum. The law of the land is the highest form of decorum. This issue is no longer a private matter. It concerns the honor of this administration and the rule of law. As a member of this family, I believe it is my duty to uphold that honor. Every word was a perfectly crafted checkmate. She turned Matilda's own rhetoric against her. You want to talk about rules? Fine. Let's talk about the actual rules. The ones that carry prison sentences. Tiffany looked like she was about to faint. She probably never imagined her little stunt would spiral into a federal investigation. She looked at Matilda, her eyes begging for a lifeline. Matilda took a deep breath, forcing a calmer tone. Elena, you're overreacting. Tiffany is young. She must be mistaken. The watch was probably just a replica. She was offering an off-ramp. Under normal circumstances, Elena would be expected to take it, say, of course, you must be right, and the crisis would be averted. But Elena wasn't normal. She offered a small, cool smile. It was the first time I'd ever seen her smile. It was terrifying. You're right, Matilda. I, too, hope it is a simple mistake. She paused, then twisted the knife. However, to prevent anyone from making a mistake like this in the future, mistaking national treasures for their personal property, I have a proposal. Everyone in the room stared at her, including me. I had a very, very bad feeling about this. Elena's voice was clear and sharp in the silent room. I propose that effective immediately, a special commission, led jointly by the Department of Justice, the Treasury, and the Government Accountability Office, be formed to conduct a complete and thorough audit of the National Archives, all discretionary funds controlled by government departments, and the finances of all federally chartered foundations associated with past administrations. During the audit, all secure vaults will be sealed. All financial accounts will be frozen. I am, of course, willing to volunteer my time to oversee this commission, to assist my husband's family, and to ensure the security of this nation's assets with every fiber of my being. Silence. Absolute, deafening silence. I saw my brother's hand tremble, rattling the teacup in its saucer. Matilda was gripping the arms of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Tiffany had gone completely catatonic, and one thought echoed in my head. Oh hell, she's insane. This wasn't an audit. This was a declaration of war. She was threatening to rip open the finances of every powerful person in Washington and expose them to the light. Me, the guy who just wanted a quiet life, had married a revolutionary. A woman who would burn down the entire system to make a point. I had a feeling my future wasn't going to be quiet anymore. It was going to be stimulating. The storm begins with a watch. In the end, Robert didn't agree to Elena's proposal, but he didn't dare refuse it either. He said it was a matter of grave importance that required consultation with his cabinet. Then he grabbed me and practically ran out of the room, leaving Matilda and Tiffany to stare at each other in the wreckage. On the ride back to the residence, Robert didn't say a word. He just kept giving me this strange, complicated look. It was a mix of pity, admiration, and a tiny bit of schadenfreude. I knew what he was thinking. Thank God that Shark is married to you and not me. When we got back to our townhouse, Elena acted as if nothing had happened. She changed her clothes and started reading a book. I walked over to her. Don't you think you went a little too far today? She turned a page, not looking up. In what way, Julian? Auditing everyone's finances? Do you know how many enemies you just made? I don't make enemies, she said. I enforce the rules. But they don't play by the rules. She finally looked up at me. That's fine. Then the rules will teach them how. I had nothing to say to that. Trying to explain social niceties to her was like trying to teach a shark to be a vegetarian. In her world, there were only two categories, in compliance and in violation. I figured my brother would bury the whole thing, let it die a quiet death in some subcommittee. I had underestimated Elena. The next morning, I was at some pointless think tank breakfast, half asleep in the back row. Suddenly, Representative O'Malley, a bulldog from the House Oversight Committee, took the podium. He called for an immediate, sweeping investigation into the management of national assets and a crackdown on corruption. The words he used weren't just similar to what Elena had said in the solarium yesterday. They were a goddamn transcript. I was instantly wide awake. Then, several other well-known government watchdogs and media figures joined the chorus. The outrage was palpable. The national heritage, the bedrock of the country, was being looted by thieves in our midst. It was a national disgrace. To not investigate would be an insult to the American people. Robert, from his seat in the Oval Office, must have felt the heat. He was trapped. The media had the scent of blood. If he tried to block the investigation now, the headlines would accuse him of a cover-up. I knew, with absolute certainty, this was Elena's doing. She didn't even have to make a public statement. All she had to do was leak the story. Priceless national treasure goes missing, to a few key people like O'Malley. They would do the rest. Exposing corruption was their brand. Robert had no choice. He grimaced and signed an executive order. A special commission on federal asset integrity was born. A joint task force, just as she'd proposed. As for who would lead it, Robert looked around at all the senior figures in his administration, every single one of them suddenly fascinated by their own shoes. This was a political suicide mission. Whoever took the job would make enemies for life. Finally, Robert's eyes landed on a photo of me on his desk. He sighed. In light of the fact that this issue was first raised by my sister-in-law, Elena Rostova-Caldwell, I believe it is fitting that my brother, Julian Caldwell, will serve as the commission's chairman. My jaw dropped. I wanted to scream. You're afraid of pissing off your own grandmother, so you throw your brother under the bus? I'm the guy who just wants to be left alone, and you want me to audit the personal finances of the most powerful woman in the country? You might as well just shoot me. Before I could even protest, Elena's father, the great Dmitry Rostova, issued a rare public statement. The president has made a wise choice, the statement read, his stoic face appearing on every news channel. My daughter, Elena, has a formidable understanding of law and forensic accounting. I formally request that the president allow her to assist Mr. Caldwell in this vital task for the good of the nation. Well, that was that. The two of them, in a perfect pincer movement, had me completely boxed in. It was official. The storm had begun with a watch, and I was the poor bastard they'd strapped to the lightning rod. I looked at the TV and my father-in-law's stern, patriotic face. I'd been shanghaied onto a pirate ship captained by my own wife and her father. My wife's ledger is death's notebook. So I became the chairman of the Special Commission on Federal Asset Integrity. My vice chair was my wife, Elena, but everyone in D.C. knew who was really in charge. I was just the public face, the Caldwell they put on the letterhead. On the first day, Elena assembled everyone in a secure conference room at the Department of Justice. Top officials from the DOJ, Treasury, FBI, GAO, a room full of sharks, every one of them looking like they'd rather be having a root canal. Elena wasted no time on pleasantries. She had aides bring in a dozen large cases. They opened them to reveal stacks of brand-new encrypted laptops, security fobs, and thick binders. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "this is the standard operating procedure manual for this audit. You will each receive a copy." I picked one up. My blood ran cold. It laid out the scope, standards, workflow, deadlines, and responsible parties with terrifying clarity. It detailed everything from the protocols for unsealing a secure vault to the methods for cross-referencing digital and physical ledgers. It was so meticulous it even specified the daily data submission quotas and nightly progress reports. This wasn't a manual. It was a set of military orders. This audit will last for 90 days. All personnel will be housed in a secure facility for the duration. All contact with outside parties is forbidden, Elena continued, her voice crisp. All findings will be subject to a system of triple-blind verification. Team A's work will be reviewed by Team B. Team B's by Team C. Any discrepancies or shortfalls are to be reported immediately. Anyone found to be withholding information will be considered an accessory and prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. During the audit, all your salaries will be tripled. Upon successful completion, the president will award additional bonuses based on performance. It was a masterstroke of strategy. Carrots and sticks. Want to slack off? Not an option. Want to cover for your friends? You have to trust that the two other teams reviewing your work would do the same. In this system, no one could afford to be anything but ruthless. I watched Elena standing at the podium, coolly assigning tasks, and I saw her in a new light. She wasn't a political wife. She was a foreman, the kind who runs a high-security construction project, where one mistake gets you buried in concrete. On day one, the first target was the Matilda Caldwell Foundation. My grandmother threw a fit. She accused Elena of being a traitor, of having no respect for her elders. It was useless. The commission had an executive order signed by the president. With that, you could kick down any door in the country. The foundation's director, her face a mask of fury, unlocked the vault. And then they witnessed what true professionalism looked like. Elena's people, dressed in simple, uniform gray suits, wore white gloves. They entered in pairs. One person would identify and catalog an asset, the other would record it. One pair of 18th century porcelain vases, catalog number 37, log. One set of South Sea pearl jewelry, catalog number 38, logged and photographed. Their voices were low but clear. Another team was creating a digital photographic record of every single item, building an unassailable chain of custody. The entire operation was more precise than a crime scene investigation. Matilda's expression shifted from rage to shock to something that looked a lot like fear. She probably thought the audit would be a formality, a show. She never imagined Elena would be this thorough, this real. That night, I came home exhausted. Elena was still in the study, poring over the day's reports. The lamplight softened the sharp angles of her face. "Did you have to go that hard?" I asked her. She put down her pen, rubbing her wrist. "Julian, when the books aren't balanced, power isn't balanced. And when power is unbalanced, the nation is unstable. With anything like this," she said, "you either don't do it, or you see it through to the absolute end. Leaving any room for ambiguity creates a vulnerability they will exploit to attack you." I looked at the mountains of data on her desk. Every file, every number could represent a person's career, their fortune, their freedom. I suddenly realized these weren't ledgers. This was my WISIT list, and she was the one calmly ticking off the names. My brother's tears. The audit proceeded like a military campaign. A cloud of dread settled over Washington. Bureaucrats and lobbyists walked on eggshells. The powerful figures in every corner of the government were terrified. For decades, They had operated with unaudited slush funds and discretionary accounts. Now, with Elena's commission, there was nowhere left to hide. 2 weeks later, the first interim report was ready. Elena had me deliver it to Robert. My hands were shaking as I carried the thick binder into the Oval Office. My brother took it from me. He didn't even get past the executive summary before his face changed. He looked like he'd just been told his dog had died. Bastards. They're all bastards. He slammed the report down on a resolute desk. My own administration's discretionary funds. 30% is unaccounted for. These parasites. I'll have them all arrested. I'll ruin them. I quietly picked up the report and brushed it off. 30%? He had no idea. This was just the top-line summary from the major departments. We hadn't even gotten to the procurement contracts, the construction budgets, the black box defense projects. I didn't have the heart to tell him Elena's private estimate. When all was said and done, the true level of graft would probably amount to half the nation's operating budget. Robert vented his fury, then collapsed into his chair. He looked at me, and his eyes held a strange, wounded expression. Was it vulnerability? Julian, he said quietly, tell me honestly, am I a failure? I'm the president of the United States, and I didn't even know how much money we had. I've been played for a fool by my own staff. I didn't know how to answer. You have a lot on your plate, Robert, I managed. It's easy to miss the small stuff. Small stuff. He gave a bitter laugh. The national debt is soaring, our infrastructure is crumbling, and the military is asking for more funding. Money is the only thing that matters. I thought our foundations were solid, that our house was in order. It was all a lie. As he spoke, his eyes welled up. The President of the United States, a man in his 40s, was looking at his younger brother like a lost kid. I felt a pang of sympathy. My brother wasn't a bad guy. He was just a little too trusting, a little too eager to believe the best in people. He'd been coddled by Matilda and his advisors, allowed to believe he was presiding over a new golden age. Now, Elena's report had shattered the illusion. It was a bucket of ice water to the face, forcing him to see the rot beneath the floorboards. Julian, he said, grabbing my arm, tell me the truth. Your wife. What is her endgame? What does she get out of burning everything to the ground? I thought for a moment. I don't know. I said honestly. I only know one thing about her. She doesn't operate based on people. She operates based on principles. In her eyes, if the numbers are wrong, they're wrong. It doesn't matter whose name is at the top of the page. Robert was silent for a long time. Finally, he let out a long sigh. She's a hell of a public servant, he said. A shame she's a woman. And your wife. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Treat her well, Julian. You don't want to be on her bad side. I nodded. No kidding. I didn't want to be on her bad side. A few taps on her keyboard, and she could probably have me declared bankrupt. Leaving the Oval Office, I saw that night had fallen. I looked up at the moon hanging over the Washington Monument. I had the strange feeling that the ground beneath the Capitol was shifting, and the epicenter of the earthquake was my quiet, unassuming wife. With a single financial report, she had made the President of the United States cry for the first time in his adult life. That was a power more formidable than any army. I became D.C.'s #1 trophy husband. The audit made me a household name in Washington. Not a good way. The prevailing theory was that Julian Caldwell was a spineless weakling who was letting his ambitious wife run roughshod over the establishment. I was the ultimate man behind the woman, a trophy husband. At first, it bothered me. Then I thought about it. Trophy husband, huh? There are worse things to be. Getting to enjoy the perks without any of the responsibility sounded pretty good to me. In fact, I discovered that being the powerless husband of a powerful woman had its advantages. Before, I was a ghost at state dinners. Now, cabinet secretaries and powerful senators greeted me with warm smiles and firm handshakes. They were terrified of saying the wrong thing, lest I go home and report back to my wife, who might then decide their department's budget needed a closer look. Secretary Vance, who used to look straight through me, now clapped me on the shoulder like we were old friends. Julian, I got my hands on a case of Pappy Van Winkle. You have to let me send some over for you and the brilliant Mrs. Caldwell. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who I was pretty sure didn't even know my name before, was suddenly inviting me to play golf at Andrews. They didn't dare try to bribe Elena directly. She would have sent their gifts back with a copy of the Ethics in Government Act and a referral to the Inspector General. So they adopted a new strategy. Get to the Queen by flattering the court eunuch. I became the most popular man in town. My primary job shifted from professional loafer to professional gift receiver. The wine cellar in our townhouse was suddenly overflowing. I had tickets to every sporting event and Broadway show. Feeling a little guilty, I went to Elena. Is it okay that I'm accepting all this stuff? She was cross-referencing the final reports, her brow furrowed in concentration. She looked up. You're a private citizen, Julian, not a government employee. You're not bound by the same ethics rules. Their gifts are personal gestures, not bribes. The president can't object. And most importantly, she looked at me, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. Everything of value must be properly appraised, documented, and recorded as an asset of the estate. It will, of course, be subject to future audits. I got it. She was using my newfound popularity to increase our net worth. All perfectly legal, all by the book. No one could touch us. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I leaned into my role as the trophy husband with gusto. I wore the designer suits, drank the vintage wine, and graciously accepted the fawning praise of powerful men. It was way better than living off my trust fund. I was even starting to enjoy it. One day, I was walking in Georgetown and ran into Tiffany Vance. She'd lost weight, her eyes were sunken, and when she saw me, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. After the watch incident, her father, Secretary Vance, had been publicly reprimanded by the president several times. The Vance family was now radioactive. She tried to turn away, but I'm not a bad person. I'm just a little vindictive. I strolled over, fanning myself with a program for the Kennedy Center. Miss Vance, long time no see. You're looking stressed. She paled, then curtsied. A curtsy in Georgetown. Pathetic. Mr. Caldwell. Please, no formalities, I said with a warm smile. By the way, did they ever figure out where that Eisenhower watch came from? Such a mystery. I was deliberately twisting the knife. I could see her lip tremble as she bit it. Sir, please, just leave me alone. Leave you alone? I snapped the fan shut and stepped closer, lowering my voice. The day you tried to humiliate my wife in front of the entire administration, did you ever think for a second about leaving her alone? Let me give you some advice, I whispered. I'm a very protective husband. My wife. I'm the only one who gets to give her a hard time. Anyone else tries it, they'll have to deal with me. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, swaying on her feet. In that moment, I had to admit, being a ruthless, power-abusing trophy husband felt pretty damn good. Matilda's dinner party. The audit was finally drawing to a close. The results were apocalyptic. The total amount of waste, fraud, and embezzlement uncovered was in the tens of billions of dollars. Enough to fund the Department of Education for a decade. The political earthquake shook D.C. to its foundations. Dozens of officials were fired or indicted. The entire leadership of several government agencies was replaced. Elena had ripped the gilded facade off Washington, and the rot underneath was for all to see. Matilda, my grandmother, was the biggest loser in the whole affair. Her network of foundations was gutted. Her political appointees and cronies were purged. She hated Elena, and she hated me for enabling her. One day, an invitation arrived. Matilda was hosting an intimate family dinner at the White House. Just the president, the other Caldwells, and us. To reconnect. I knew it instantly. This wasn't a dinner. It was an ambush. She'd recovered, rearmed, and now she was planning her revenge. We shouldn't go, I told Elena. I'll tell Robert we're sick. Elena was trying on a new evening gown, a simple, elegant sheath of deep blue that made her look like royalty. Why wouldn't we go, she said. Matilda is hosting a family dinner. It would be disrespectful not to attend. Because it's a trap. Don't worry, Julian. She adjusted a stray hair in the mirror. Whatever she has planned, we'll handle it. Seeing her calm demeanor did nothing to soothe my nerves. This time, Matilda would be prepared. She wouldn't try to argue with Elena about rules or laws. She would use the one weapon Elena couldn't counter. Tradition. Family. Duty. It was a direct assault, and it was the hardest kind to defend against. When we arrived at the White House, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Matilda sat at the head of the table, a smile plastered on her face that didn't reach her cold eyes. The president sat beside her, looking deeply uncomfortable. The other family members were sitting ramrod straight, barely breathing. Elena and I paid our respects and took our seats. The dinner began, a parade of exquisite food and polite, meaningless conversation. But everyone knew it was just the prelude. After the main course, Matilda made her move. She didn't look at Elena. She looked at Robert. Robert, I've been having the most troubling dreams lately. I dream of your grandfather. In my dreams, he tells me he's worried. He says the younger generation has forgotten what's important. They have no respect for their elders, no sense of family duty. As she spoke, everyone's eyes subtly shifted toward Elena. Elena was methodically peeling an orange, as if she hadn't heard a word. The president gave a weak laugh. Mother, you worry too much. We all respect our family's traditions. Talk is cheap, Robert. Matilda's voice turned sharp. Duty isn't something you talk about, it's something you do. She abruptly turned to Elena. Elena. Elena put down her orange and rose. Yes, Matilda. Matilda's eyes were like daggers. I have a question for you. Since you married into this family, have you once offered to host a charity event? Have you once volunteered to help with the White House Historical Association? Have you ever, even once, simply called me to ask how I am? 3 questions fired like bullets. This was the attack. She was using the unspoken rules of the political wife against her. These were trivial things, but they were part of the expected role. Elena, busy dismantling the corrupt infrastructure of the federal government, had certainly never done them. But if Elena admitted it, she would be branded as an ungrateful, undutiful daughter-in-law. Everyone stared at Elena, waiting for her answer. I knew that the moment she showed any weakness, Matilda would pounce, launching a relentless assault until Elena was forced to apologize. Then, Matilda could frame the entire audit as the misguided tantrum of an ill-mannered child and begin to claw back her power. My heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. Elena, what are you going to do? You can't quote the federal code on this one. There's no law that says you have to be nice to your grandmother-in-law. Duty? No, that's just emotional blackmail. Faced with Matilda's public indictment, Elena remained perfectly calm. She inclined her head respectfully. You are correct, Matilda. I have not done those things. A murmur went through the room. A cold, triumphant smile touched Matilda's lips. This was the confession she'd been waiting for. So you admit it? You've been derelict in your duties. I would not use that word, Elena said. I simply believe that duty can be divided into 2 forms, minor duties and major duties. And what, pray tell, is the difference? Matilda pressed. Hosting teas, attending galas, making pleasant conversation. These are the minor duties of a woman in my position, Elena explained, her voice even. But ensuring the long-term stability of this family's legacy, protecting this administration from the cancer of corruption, securing the nation's finances so that its people may prosper, and by doing so, guaranteeing you a peaceful and respected future. That is the major duty. She lifted her head, her gaze locking with Matilda's. For the past 3 months, at the president's request, I have worked day and night, dedicating my every waking moment to fulfilling that major duty. If in the course of performing my major duty, I have neglected my minor duties, then I accept your criticism. But if you are asking me to abandon my major duty for the sake of the minor, to allow the foundations of this country to crumble so that I might have more time for pleasantries, then that is a dereliction I cannot commit. Her words echoed in the silent room. Everyone was stunned. I stared at her, my mouth agape. Holy hell, I thought she was cornered. Instead, she had just redefined the entire concept of duty. She'd taken Matilda's attack and spun it into an act of profound loyalty and patriotism. She wasn't being a bad daughter-in-law. She was being the ultimate patriot, and by extension, the ultimate protector of the Caldwell legacy. How does a mind even work like that? Matilda's face flushed red, then went pale. Elena had backed her into a rhetorical corner. She couldn't very well say, I don't care about the country. I just want you to pour my tea. It would make her look petty and foolish. The president's own mother, valuing tea parties over national security? Robert's eyes lit up. He saw the lifeline she'd thrown him. Elena is absolutely right. Mother, her tireless work for the country is the greatest expression of loyalty a person can show. Hear, hear. Another one of my uncles chimed in. A woman of substance and principle. We're lucky to have her in the family. No one in that room was an idiot. Elena's speech had given everyone the perfect way out. She defended herself, flattered the president, and elevated the entire family's image. Who would argue with that? Matilda was shaking with fury. She had prepared a long list of grievances, and Elena had dismantled the entire foundation of her attack with a single, elegant argument. She wasn't ready to give up. A clever tongue you have, Elena, she spat. Fine, let's say you're right about duty. But what about character? A woman of your station should be gentle, kind, agreeable. Your methods are ruthless, your actions aggressive. You have none of the traditional female virtues. She was shifting from duty to a direct attack on Elena's character. Elena smiled. Matilda, the traditional virtues you speak of were defined by a different era. But our own family's patriarch, the great President Caldwell himself, she said, turning to Robert, wrote a new set of values in his own memoir. Mr. President, if I recall correctly, the first chapter begins with the line, she quoted from memory, the women of the Caldwell family must be strong and independent. They must be capable of securing the nation abroad and managing the family at home. Their virtue lies not in feigned meekness, but in demonstrable strength. Am I mistaken, sir? Robert, who had been looking lost, was suddenly beaming. You're right. He did write that. That book is in the presidential library. It was a piece of family history most people had forgotten. Subsequent generations had found the old-fashioned, more pliable model of womanhood more convenient. But Elena had resurrected it. She had used the words of the dynasty's revered founder to silence his own widow. It was the ultimate trump card. Matilda's face turned a shade of purple. She had lost, utterly and completely. On the battlefield of duty, she'd been outmaneuvered by Major Duty. On the battlefield of character, she'd been defeated by the dynasty's founding father. Elena hadn't even raised her voice. She had simply occupied the moral and logical high ground, and from that unassailable peak, she had watched her opponent's attack crumble into dust. I looked at my wife, and a single thought crossed my mind. Never, ever get into an argument with a lawyer, especially a lawyer who has read all the books, knows all the rules, and has a memory like a steel trap. They are invincible. The last act of desperation. The dinner party ended in a rout. Matilda, defeated and humiliated, retreated from public life, claiming ill health. Tiffany Vance's family was quietly reassigned to a minor diplomatic post in some forgotten corner of the world. A sense of calm returned to Washington. Elena's audit concluded, a resounding success. The president, his administration cleansed of its worst corruption, was lauded in the press. He showered our household with gifts and public praise. As the commission's figurehead chairman, I even got some of the credit. I thought, foolishly, that this was it, that we could finally have a quiet life. I was too naive. I had forgotten that a cornered animal is the most dangerous. 1 month later, late at night, our world exploded. The flashing lights of police cars painted our bedroom walls red and blue. A team of FBI agents stormed our townhouse. The man in charge was Director Evans, the head of the Secret Service and my brother's most trusted enforcer. He was stone-faced, holding an official document. By order of the President of the United States, he read in a monotone, Elena Rostova-Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy and treason against the United States. Julian Caldwell, you're to be confined to this residence under house arrest. You're not to leave or make contact with anyone without direct authorization. I was completely stunned. Treason? It was insane. Elena? Commit treason? The woman was so patriotic, she probably bled red, white, and blue. Her idea of a wild night was rereading the Constitution. Evans, there has to be a mistake. I yelled. Director. Evans shook his head. I'm just following orders, Julian. We found this in your home office. See for yourself. An agent brought forward a sealed evidence case. Inside were several encrypted hard drives and a satellite phone. Forged executive orders, plans for a military coup, and encrypted communications with a hostile foreign power, Evans said grimly. The evidence is ironclad. My mind went blank. It was a frame-up, the most vicious, lethal frame-up imaginable. Last time it was a watch. This time it was high treason. Whoever was behind this wasn't trying to wound Elena. They were trying to bury her, to eliminate her so completely there was no possibility of a comeback. They took Elena away. Through it all, she said nothing. But just before they let her out the door, she turned and looked at me. Her eyes were calm. So calm it terrified me. I knew this was Matilda's final move. Her last, desperate gambit. She knew she could never beat Elena in a battle of wits or rules. So she had decided to stop playing by the rules altogether. She had flipped the table and resorted to raw, brute force. This time, could Elena's intellect and knowledge of the law save her? I didn't know. All I knew was that the heavy oak door of my home clicked shut behind them, and I was a prisoner. My wife had been taken to a black site. My world was collapsing. I paced the room like a caged animal. What could I do? I had no network, no power. My brother had signed the order. He wouldn't see or speak to anyone now. I couldn't even get a message out. For the first time in my life, I felt utterly, hopelessly powerless. My wife, the woman who lived by the rules, was trapped in a place where there were no rules. Could she survive? Just as I was sinking into despair, one of our old housekeepers, a man who had served my family for 50 years, quietly slipped an envelope into my hand. Mr. Caldwell, he whispered. Mrs. Caldwell gave this to me a few weeks ago. She said if a day ever came when she was taken from this house, I was to give it to you. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It wasn't a letter. It was a single, ornate key, and a small note with 2 words on it. The study. I ran to the study. It was filled with books, nothing more. I searched desperately, finally finding a hidden compartment beneath the heavy mahogany desk where Elena always worked. I used the key. The lock clicked open. Inside, there was no money, no weapons, no escape plan. There was only a single, thick, leather-bound portfolio. I opened it. The title page, written in Elena's precise, cold script, sent a shiver down my spine. Project Nightfall, an investigative report on domestic threats to the Republic, including Matilda Caldwell, Secretary Vance, and affiliated parties, with recommended countermeasures. I stared at it, stunned. I turned the page. It was a copy of a secret communication between Matilda's brother, a major defense contractor, and a foreign intelligence agency. The next page was a complete breakdown of Secretary Vance's network of corruption, showing how he had sold positions and favors to build a shadow government. The next, financial records detailing how they had siphoned billions from black budget projects to fund a private mercenary army. Page after page, crime after crime. The evidence was meticulous, irrefutable, and damning. The timeline began 3 years ago. Elena had been investigating them since before she even met me. Marrying me, launching the audit, taking down the Vance family. It wasn't random. It was all part of her plan. She wasn't fighting a political battle. She was running a deep-cover counterintelligence operation, an operation against the highest levels of her own government. At the very back of the portfolio was a single, sealed document. It was a presidential directive drafted by my father, the former president. It authorized Julian Caldwell to assume full executive authority to counter a direct threat of insurrection, with the power to command military units and to act with lethal force. Below the signature was a small, embossed seal, not the presidential seal, my father's personal seal, and beside it, a handwritten note from the desk of President Caldwell. Per our conversation, this authority is absolute. My hands were shaking. I finally understood. My wife wasn't a fixer, or a prosecutor, or a political operator. She was a weapon, a failsafe, the sharpest blade, forged by my own father and left in waiting. A blade designed for one purpose: to protect the Republic, even from his own family. And I was the sheath. She had anticipated Matilda's desperate, illegal move. She had, in fact, counted on it. She allowed herself to be captured, to be taken off the board, so that all of her enemies would reveal themselves, leaving me to close the net. I looked down at the portfolio. A cold calm washed over me. Screw it, I thought. It's just a coup. My wife has already done all the work. I picked up the portfolio and the directive and strode to the front door of the townhouse. Open this door. I roared at the FBI agents standing guard. I'm going to the White House. I'm cleaning house. My wife is the final boss. That night, Washington, D.C. was purged. Armed with my father's directive, I took command of the capital's military district. The entire city went in a lockdown. The estate of Matilda's brother was raided by a SEAL team. He and his entire family were taken into custody. Secretary Vance was arrested at his home. Everyone on the list in Elena's portfolio was rounded up. The powerful men who had ruled the city for decades were, by dawn, broken and begging in federal custody. I led a team of soldiers into the White House. My brother Robert nearly fell out of his chair when he saw the directive in my hand. He had no idea our father had put such a plan in motion. I threw Elena's portfolio on his desk. Read it, Robert. See what your beloved grandmother and her friends have been up to. He read it. By the end, his face was ashen. He couldn't speak. Finally, I went to the East Wing, to Matilda's private residence. She was sitting there, dressed in a silk gown, perfectly composed. She showed no surprise when she saw me. You know, she said. It wasn't a question. Yes, I answered. It was that bitch, Elena, wasn't it? She hissed. My wife was simply carrying out our father's last wish, I said coldly, to correct the course. Ha ha ha. She began to laugh, a wild, unhinged sound that echoed in the grand room. To correct the course. I plotted and schemed my entire life, only to be beaten by a little girl. Her laughter died. From her sleeve, she produced a small, elegant vial. Remember this, Julian. I didn't lose to you, and I didn't lose to Elena. I lost to your father. With that, she drank it. She was gone before she hit the floor. The rebellion was over. At dawn, I went to the secure facility to get Elena. She had been given fresh clothes and was sitting in her cell, reading a book. She looked as if she were in a university library, not a federal prison. The guard stood at a distance, terrified of her. I walked to the cell door. It's over. She closed the book and stood up. I know. She looked at me and asked, Were you afraid, Julian? I paused, then gave a bitter laugh. Terrified. My legs are still shaking. She smiled. A real smile this time. It wasn't big, but it was warm, and it transformed her face. Not anymore, she said. From now on, you can live any life you want. No one will ever bother you again. On the ride home, we sat in silence in the back of the armored car. I finally looked at her. What are you? She considered the question. I am Dmitri Rostov's daughter. I am also the person your father chose to be his corrector. She explained that in his final years, My father saw the rot of corruption and greed growing within his own party and family. He was too old and too tired to fight it himself. So he chose Elena, then just a brilliant young law student. He chose her for her intelligence, her calm, and her utter ruthlessness. He gave her the mission and the authority to one day clean house. He had Dmitri Rostova train her, teach her everything she needed to know. Even her marriage to me, the harmless, apolitical spare, was part of the plan. It was the perfect cover, allowing her to get inside the family without raising suspicion. I listened, speechless. My entire life, from my birth to my marriage, had been a single move in someone else's chess game. I wasn't a person. I was a strategic asset. And me? I finally asked, my voice hoarse. Was I just part of the mission? Elena was silent. The only sound was the hum of the car's engine. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. At first, yes, but then I found that you... She trailed off. You found what? I pressed. She shook her head, not finishing the sentence. Instead, she rested her head on my shoulder. It was a gesture so light, so hesitant, I barely felt it. I sat perfectly still, afraid to move. I never found out what she was going to say. All I know is that from that day on, my wife, who had once only read legal texts and financial reports, started reading other things, like cookbooks and gardening guides. She even started to smile more. It was still a little stiff, but I thought it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I never set foot in the White House again. My brother, humbled by the crisis, grew into a real leader, a true president. And me? I went back to being the spare. I zoned out, I watched cable news, I cashed my checks. Except now, I had someone with me. Someone who would peel oranges for me, who would tell me to wear a coat when it was cold. The rumors in D.C. about me being a trophy husband only intensified. They call me the ultimate freeloader, the man who rose to power on his wife's coattails. I just laughed whenever I heard it. They had no idea. Being sheltered by the most powerful person in the world. They couldn't possibly imagine how great it is. This kind of free ride? I could do this for the rest of my life. Yeah, I could definitely get used to this.